Please rise for our national anthem.
Oh, big right hand for Du Plessis. Now he's forced to throw body kicks or high kicks. And again out of range. Body shots are both there. Good right hand for Du Plessis. As advertised.
They are going crazy. This is history. I'm African, but I ain't no brother of your side. Let's go. You might.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the second episode of MMA Analytics, the channel where we delve into statistics to analyze fight narratives and make predictions on UFC outcomes. Today, we'll be doing a statistical analysis of Dricus Duplesis' victory over Sean Strickland at UFC 297. First, we'll be analyzing the narratives coming into the fight and how those played out, and then we'll be analyzing why I believe Strickland lost. The largest narrative going into this fight was the susceptibility of Dricus' gas tank, and to be honest, I can't blame most people for believing that narrative because A, post round 1 Dricus has the worst body language I have ever seen, and B, look at this knockout of Derek Brunson. My brother is smashing him in slow motion, with pound for pound the most tired knockout I have ever seen. In my previous video, I discussed how this narrative was overblown because Dricus was pushing a historic pace in these fights. Look at this offensive pace chart. We can see he throws the second most strikes per minute and spams the fourth most takedown attempts per minute in the division. Think about it this way. It doesn't matter if you're the best marathon runner in history, sprinting the 800 meters at 100% is going to tire you out regardless. Well, how did this narrative play out in the fight? Well, I think based on the expectations of a Dricus cardio disaster class, this narrative was massively overblown. My most basic statistic to measure offensive effort, Dricus' attempted strikes, rose in each consecutive round, except the fourth, hitting a crescendo in the fifth. Had this gas tank ran out to the extent that most people expected, we would have expected to observe a marked decline in strikes attempted. This indicates that his offensive effort remained high, and by further examining his strike accuracy in conjunction with attempts, we don't observe a marked decline in accuracy as one would expect from a tired fighter. That being said, while Dricus did not offensively gas out, defensively that's another story. To measure defense, we'll be using percentage strikes defended, which is simply the inverse of your opponent's strike accuracy. See, I believe that when fighters gas, the very first thing they lose is the ability to defend themselves properly, because offensively you can pre-plan a sequence in your head.
Distract target. Then block his blind jab. Counter with cross to left cheek. Discombobulate.
While defense is largely dependent on reactions and speed, which suffer considerably when tired. To show this, look at these two graphs showing Strickland's offensive strikes landed and his strike accuracy over the fight. We can see the 2 rounds Sean won as clear as day in the data, with the first and the fifth being a massacre in this regard. But I want us to pay attention to this marked increase in both accuracy of his shots and quantity of shots landed. Without a doubt, the 5th round was Sean's most impactful offensive round, and we'll discuss the reason in the section labeled Strickland's Cardio King Game Plan. But for now, we'll take this as evidence that Dricus had finally gassed to some extent in the 5th round. The second narrative I'd observed was around Strickland's impregnable defense. In my previous video, I praised the efficacy of Sean Strickland's defense, claiming it was the best defense in the division, and I produced this graphic to show that Sean has a crushing effect on the offensive success of his opponents. This once again held true, as he decreased DDP's strike accuracy drastically from 55% to 38%. I mean, just look at this graph. A major part of this success was limiting DDP's effectiveness on the ground, because normally DDP's strike distribution looks like this, and against Strickland I can even make a chart because he landed exactly 0 ground strikes. Given that Strickland neutralized DDP's effectiveness on the ground, successfully implemented his trademark defense, outstruck DDP in 4 out of 5 rounds, and outlasted DDP's gas tank, what can the statistics tell us about why Strickland lost? Ultimately, I believe Strickland's loss can be attributed to one major factor: adaptability. Both the abundance from DDP and the complete absence of it from Sean Strickland. The first point under adaptability is Sean's complete reluctance to capitalize earlier on his cardio advantage until the 5th. Sean's game plan going into the fight was clearly to use his phenomenal defense to outlast Dricus, waiting until the latter rounds to truly threaten a knockout while using the earlier rounds to chip away at Dricus with his jab. We can see this clearly in the data, where we observe the spike in accuracy and volume, with Strickland landing the same in round 5 as in rounds 2 and 3 combined. Without looking at the data, just simply looking at the footage of the fight, this is honestly the first time I saw in the entire fight Sean throw a massive right with the intention of ending the fight. Up until this moment, Sean had basically been hard sparring with Dricus, with no intention of ending the fight before the final bell. And I feel justified in saying Sean should have ramped it up earlier, because when Sean finally came out swinging, Dricus simply could not match him on the pace. Dricus was out there looking like prime sneaker. Now, before criticizing Strickland for pinning everything on the last round, I wanted to investigate whether he had successfully implemented his Cardio King game plan in the past, paying particular attention to when he decided to quote-unquote turn up the pressure like he did in the 5th round. So I took his last 4 decisions before fighting Dricus and plotted his average strike accuracy and strike landed per round. As we can see, looking at this graph, Strickland typically turns it up on average in round 3 onwards. His strike accuracy and the strikes landed have a marked increase from round 2 to 3, with a 10% difference in striking accuracy. Looking at this pattern, historically, round 1 and 2 have been similar. Round 3 and 4 are massive for Strickland, so massive that even in the decision that he lost against Cannonier in this data, the fans still gave him those rounds. So we can see he really turns it up in the latter rounds of the fight, and he was hoping to do the same against Dricus, but did it ultimately too late. So, if we compare this historical striking accuracy with these match against Dricus, we unfortunately find the data is almost completely inverse. Sean starts well, dominating round 1, then decides to coast through rounds 2 to 4 and lets the fight completely get away from him before finally exploding and dominating the 5th round. Looking at the strikes landed, the difference that jumps out for me most profoundly is how different his 5th round with Dricus looked in comparison to his average. For me, it indicates that he had too much left in the tank. We can see this further in the fan scorecards, with over 90% of fans giving Sean the 1st and the 5th, but giving Dricus the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th. This leads to one question. Why did Sean choose to explode in the 5th, given that he typically explodes in the 3rd, as we've seen in the data? Here's my hypothesis. Sean came into this fight with a game plan, heavily influenced by 2 previous fights. The first is Sean's win over Obus.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy. Okay.
Look at the strike accuracy data from Sean's win over Obus. It is absolutely mental. You can tell the story of 2 rounds. Obus completely folded after the 1st round, and Sean swooped in and demolished and exhausted Obus. I firmly believe that Sean was conserving energy, waiting for Dricus to reach that level of fatigue before turning it up. He waited, and suddenly the 5th had arrived, and Sean realized far too late that Dricus was in fact not a cardio bum like Obus. The second fight that influenced the game plan, in my opinion, is the recent loss to Alex Pereira.
Good, because he's... Oh!
Sean has always been a cautious fighter, and that has a significant role to play in the efficacy of his defense. The only finish Sean has achieved in the last 8 bouts before Dricus has come against an exhausted Abus, who's currently 1-2 in the UFC. Again, a complete bump.
Oh my God, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass.
And the one decision loss was against Cannonier, which the fans thought he won. The only uncontentious, definitive loss in the same time period is to Alex Pereira by first round knockout. And looking at footage of Sean Strickland after the fight, it is abundantly clear that he's extremely disgusted with his performance, and I believe that affected his psychology against Dricus. I think Sean didn't want to give Dricus the slimmest chance of KOing him, as he believed he would not lose to Dricus by decision, which is validated by his dominance in the first round of the fight, and by this graphic. In my previous video, I showed this graphic that shows that of the fighters in the top 5 of his division, Sean is the one you'd least like to face after round 2 because he wins those bouts at the highest rate in the division, corresponding to when he normally quote-unquote turns it up. Unfortunately for Sean, he realized the decision wasn't guaranteed far too late. So to reiterate, Sean believed Dricus would gas much earlier and much harder than he did, and believed that the only risk was Dricus's power, with the decision already a foregone conclusion in Sean's favor. The second point under adaptability is Dricus's ability to consistently produce threats for Strickland.
Parkour! Michael, parkour! Parkour! Extreme! Parkour! Parkour!
I believe Strickland's first round brilliancy doomed him to losing this fight. According to the stats, Strickland absolutely dominated this round, utilizing his jab and teep kick to keep Dricus firmly at distance, while forcing Dricus to swing at air with his stellar distance management. Strickland did not have to adapt at all, but for Dricus, this round forced him to swim or drown.
Yeah, they had us the first half, I'm not gonna lie. They had us. We weren't defeated, but they had us.
And unbeknownst to Sean, peppered through this one-sided round, Dricus had laid the foundation for an impressive round 2, round 3, and round 4. Firstly, Dricus had to deal with the threat of the teep kick, which Sean used to great efficacy in the first. In response, Dricus adjusted and instituted a pressure-heavy game plan and introduced the threat of the takedown in the latter parts of the first round, discouraging Sean from utilizing the teep. Secondly, Dricus had struggled to land on Sean as he hunted for his head. But Sean simply leaned back to avoid his strikes. Dricus duly adjusted in the second round and had noticed his body shots were far more effective as Sean's defense left his body still available to land, and so drastically increased his body shot attempts, as we can see in this data. Thirdly, Dricus struggled to counter the effectiveness of Sean's checks on his leg kicks, and so just progressively stopped throwing leg kicks. Now, that may not seem like an adjustment and rather seems like giving up on a strategy, but it shows that Dricus is a cognitive fighter that adapts to what works and what doesn't as a fight progresses. I think this is partly the reason for his unconventional style. Dricus does not choose to be brainlessly technical as other fighters do. Rather, he focuses on what practically works for him. These last 2 adjustments I cannot justify with data, so this is kind of a trust me bro situation. But because Dricus was struggling to land with these initial charges, he began increasing the length of his punches and the quantity of punches in his combinations to land on Sean after he leaned back or stepped away. Again, this demonstrates an extreme ability to adapt. And the second adjustment was the increase in strike variety, as Dricus concluded he could not just box with Sean, and after the first round integrated body and head kicks into his offense, adding further complexity for Sean's defensive efforts, and by extension his fight IQ won him this fight. In fact, I would say that Dricus is an anti-Michael Chandler of sorts, with phenomenal fight IQ. As a South African, I am immensely proud of Dricus, the UFC's first true Africa-based champion. Thank you for watching.